Hello all, Alan here, and welcome to the very first in what I hope to become a weekly series of anime reviews on this here channel. But knowing me, I'll probably end up missing a week here and there. I'll try not to though. Anyway, decided to have a look at Guilty Crown first, as I had a lot of mixed opinions on the show the first time I watched it and felt like having another go. With that out of the way, let's get straight to it. Guilty Crown aired in the fall season of 2011, was produced by the studio Production IG, written by Hiroyuki Yoshino and directed by Tetsuro Araki. The story takes place in Tokyo in 2039 after a pandemic known as the Apocalypse virus shook the nation during an incident called Lost Christmas 10 years prior. The virus itself is basically some weird crystallization cancer thing that gradually turns its victims into lumps of crystal and they crumble to bits. During Lost Christmas, a military force called GHQ was swept in by the United Nations to try and control the spread of the virus, and they eventually gained political control over Japan. GHQ and their main armed force antibodies employ methods that are often brutal, oppressive, and will end up killing a lot of innocent people. And on the flip side, we have our anti-government terrorist group called the Undertakers, whose general goal is to throw a spanner in the works of GHQ and, well, overthrow them. That's pretty much it for the setting, and now the plot revolves around the actions and trials of our protagonist, Orma Shu. Shu is an incredibly average 17-year-old high school student. He's nervous, hasn't got many friends, and is an all-round very bland human being. One average day, he happens upon an injured Yuzuri Haranori, who he knows of as the famous net idol of pop group Egoist. Inori is a member of the Undertakers and is taken away by GHQ before Shu's eyes, leaving him to complete a task that had been assigned to her. At this point, Shu's forced to make the decision between going about his usual, average, incredibly normal everyday business, or helping this injured girl he idolises and attempt to save her in the process. He then runs into Tsutsugamie Guy, leader of the Undertakers, and is thrown into a situation where he has to battle against GHQ to save Inori. In saving her, he uses this dangerous technology known as the Voigulon that grants him the power of the king's right hand and allows him to draw out people's souls, given form as a weapon or device known as their void. From here on out, the story simply follows Shu and his journey through the events that unfold after this incident. Guilty Crown wears its influences on its sleeve so much so that on my first watch through I was constantly reminded that I'd seen these events, characters and plot devices used before. The amount of influences it displays works against it, as it often leaves the narrative progression feeling really disjointed in the twists and turns it takes. It also used a lot of overly convenient plot devices that left me feeling a bit underwhelmed with how easily seemingly important situations were resolved. And with this in mind, the show's pacing actually starts off pretty great, up to a point, and then things start going all over the place. There's also a matter of how I never really found the antagonist's motives to be at all relevant until they cram in an episode's worth of flashbacks at the end of the series to explain why things are the way they are. Throughout, it just seems like the studio has crammed in every cliche going, and at times it really does feel like a mess. So in terms of story, that's about all needs to be said. So before I go a bit deeper into some of the protagonists, I thought I'd list off some of the notable side characters. Within the Undertakers, we have Shinomiya Ayase, a paraplegic tsundere mecha pilot, Tsugumi, the Nekomimi plugsuit hacker lady, as well as about 4 other named characters in there. On the high school side, we have Samakawa Yahiro, a nice bloke at first, with spoiler plot twist, Tamadate Sota, a sickeningly normal and uninteresting chap, Menjo Hare, Shu's secondary love interest, and Kuhoin Arisa, the student council president. Then we have our main antagonists. At the top of that is Keido Shuichiro. He's the head of GHQ's antibodies and the man behind a great deal of what makes GHQ so corrupt. Makoto Waltz Segai, an antibodies major and a bit of an oddball who looks like a clown, has a prosthetic eye and takes photos of dead people with his phone sometimes. Quite like him actually, he's amusing. There's Daryl Yan. He's a hothead violent ace endlave pilot and basically feels like a bunch of those early antagonists from Modern Gundam series fused together. Oh, and there's this Yu guy who claims to be the great keeper of Dart. Still not sure what he's about. He's important though, I think. Finally, in a category of her own, we have Orma Haruka. She's Shu's mum, works for GHQ, and doesn't really wear clothing when she's indoors. With that out of the way, back onto Shu. Shu is a painfully plainly designed character. He looks like, well, a protagonist, and has very few defining features visually apart from that highlight in his hair. Though he does look pretty cool when he dons a winter coat and becomes king of the scarves later in the series. As a character though, he is rather lacking. Throughout the series he is constantly shown to be incredibly human and just really normal. This in and of itself is not really a bad thing, it's just that he shows little more than this, and the situations he's thrown into don't seem to allow him to evolve, just put as much emotional strain on the guy as possible. So much so that in any moment of respite he always ends up coming across exactly as he did in episode 1. His relationship with our main heroine Inori is quite fun to watch though. Granted, it's full of cliche, but I still enjoyed it. And as for Inori herself, I find it basically impossible to objectively describe her. She's one of those silent, mysterious types you just want to protect, and that happens to be a character of type I absolutely adore. So though she is actually probably fairly uninteresting and certainly not original, I enjoyed every moment she was on the screen. Her design is just gorgeous, and every outfit she's put in is so intricately designed and easy on the eyes. I'll stop there though. All you need to know is that she's an Ayanami Rei type lady, and if you're into those, you'll probably love her. Lastly, in our triangle of importance, we have Guy. He's one of those strong leadery characters, and to put it simply, it looks and feels a hell of a lot like a combination of Holland and Griffith, and is held in the same regard as those characters are by the supporting cast. For those unfamiliar with those characters, that basically means he's respected and adored by all of his underlings. I'm all for his design though. The Undertaker uniform is pretty interesting to look at in general. His appearance certainly matches his character. Though unoriginal, his role is incredibly important, and without him the show would lack any focus. There is one thing that baffles me though. Guy's 17. He looks nowhere near the same age as Shu and Nori, not to mention the guy's a leader of a large and important terrorist organisation. Moving on, and just in case I hadn't made it clear, the show does have a mecha aspect to it, but I must say I have no love for the design of the Endlaves, which is surprising really, considering how nice everything else in the show looks. Most of them just look so bland and gangly, and there's basically no variation to the things aside from a couple of prettier customs for ISA and Daryl. It's just the same grunts shown throughout the entire series, and they aren't very interesting. Mecha's clearly not big on Guilty Crown's agenda though, so it doesn't really matter. Moving further into the concept of visuals, that is where the show really shines. The detail on the backdrops, the wide colour palette and great integration of CG makes everything look gorgeous. The animation quality itself is brilliant as well. Everything is rendered in perfect detail, and even subtle things like hair moving in the wind has great attention paid to it. This animation is shown off best through the action scenes, and they really are a sight to behold. The battle sequences in the show should be enough to keep you interested even if you hate everything else. Yeah, there are pretty much no complaints about this aspect of the show in my book. Top marks on the visuals. Now the other superficial aspect this show really excels in is the audio. With a decent cast of voice actors, the acting and quality of the Japanese dubbing was certainly acceptable. Not amazing by any stretch, but I certainly have nothing to complain about. The sound effects and general recording quality is fantastic. There was never a moment when something sounded off and the audio just flowed seamlessly with the visuals. As for the music, well, it's probably my favourite thing about the show. Both OPs and EDs were fantastic, and Supercell did a great job on all of them. The score was composed by Sawano Hiroyuki and ticked every box for me. The insert music made certain scenes just so memorable, and without them I doubt I would have wanted to watch the show a second time. So that's Guilty Crown. It was a show I had pretty high expectations for when I first watched it, as on the outside it seemed to carry with it a ton of the things I love about anime in general. And though it did display these things somewhat, and had the potential to be great, it just felt so copy-pasted from better anime that preceded it. I mean, superficially, the show's fantastic. Everything about it looks and sounds gorgeous, and I can also honestly say that if I had seen this show before I had seen a lot of the anime in its immediate genre, I would probably rate it a lot higher than I do. It also did surprise me how much I enjoyed it in the second watch though, but I did go in fully expecting of its flaws, and just, well, enjoyed it for what it was, not for what I wanted it to be. Overall, I give the show a fairly respectable 62%. I love the visuals, the audio, Nori, and the fact that the only beverage you see them drink in the entire show is a thing called Dr. Ginger, which sounds amazing, but I guess it really was lacking in areas that actually matter. So if you like the whole corrupt government body versus terrorists and a superpowered protagonist with romance thing, then you should at least get as much out of the show as I did. If you're not, however, then Guilty Crown certainly won't change your mind. Though I must say, for anyone planning on watching it, if you don't like the first episode, then you probably won't like the rest of the show at all. Guilty Crown is currently licensed by Manga Entertainment in the UK and Funimation Entertainment in the US, where it's available for streaming on their site. Now, being my first video, I'd appreciate any criticism you folk can offer, and with that I shall depart. So long. Onigiri. Onigiri. Onigiri.